Bezos Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Zevachim, Daf Mem Vav, and we're beginning from about like 7 lines from the bottom of Daf Mem Hey Amid Beis. Daf Mem Hey Amid Beis. Gemara begins Ashkecham Tuma. I'm going to try to make this big. Ashkecham Tuma Noisim Enolam. So in the Mishnah we learned that that Tuma applies by the koimitz. Let's take a look at a mincha. There's a koimitz that you throw on the mizbeach, and then there's shiyore ha-mincha, the rest of the mincha, which is eaten by the kahanim. So we know that pigel does not apply by the koimitz, but applies by the rest of the mincha. But the Mishnah told us that by the koimitz, although pigel doesn't apply, tuma, noiser, and tuma do apply. Tuma, noiser, and tuma. So we got through saying that we have a pasuk that says that tuma applies even by the koimitz. So ashkechan tuma, we find that tuma applies by the koimitz. Noiser menolim. How do we know that noiser also applies? And it says the Gemara asa chil mituma. We learned the issa noiser is learned from the inyan of eating kachim betuma with exerishav of chilul. The word chilul is written by both of them. So that's why once we know tuma applies by the koimitz, so also noiser. Says the Gemara, so noiser also has a exerishav to pigel. V'leilif ava mi pigel. Let us have exerishav also. Avin. There's a exerishav that teaches you learn noiser from pigel, and pigel does not apply by the koimitz. So we'll say that tuma doesn't apply by the koimitz. As we'll say that noiser doesn't apply by the koimitz as well, because you have exerishav to pigel. So we have a choice: learn noiser from tuma and say noiser applies by the koimitz, or learn noiser from pigel and say noiser does not apply by the koimitz. It says the Gemara, it's better off to learn the inyan of noiser from tuma, which applies on all parts of the offering. Because noiser is very similar to tuma, gezel siman. 3 ways: gimel, zayin, lamed. Rashi goes through them. But basically, the point is that there are 3 ways where noiser is more similar to tuma. So therefore, I'd rather learn noiser from tuma as to what should be done regarding the koimitz. Says the Gemara, adarab, just the opposite. Let's learn noiser from pigel. It's more similar to pigel. Shekain huter tzitz tar mizbazman kokarev v'hani nefishim. There's much more in common between noiser and pigel than noiser and tuma. So therefore, if I have a question, my question is, does noiser apply by the koimitz itself? The koimitz which is thrown onto the mizbeach. Let's say you pulled it off the mizbeach and left it over and then ate it. Is there a din noiser on that? So the question is, you could learn that idea from tuma, that just like the din tuma applies by the koimitz, so also the din noiser will apply by the koimitz. Or will you say you learn it from pigel, noiser from pigel, and just like there is no pigel by the koimitz, there will be no noiser by the koimitz. No problem with noiser. And says the Gemara, so we finally say, Ella, 3 lines in the bottom. Mid the Tani Levi taught. The Tani Levi taught. The pasuk says, the Nazru Mikotcha B'nai Yisrael, right? So from there we learn there's an Isser Achilas Kotcha Betuma, and everything is included in that. So Tuma includes not only the Shiyare HaMincha, but even the Koimitz. How do I know, besides eating the Koimitz Betuma, the Kotcha Betuma, how do you know that pasuk is also referring to eating it after the time expired? Right, which is nicer. Talmud loima v'lo chalalu es shem kachi ashehem makdishim li. Right, ani Hashem. So we say b'shnei chilulim. We go to Amid. We go to Memvav Amid Aleph. B'shnei chilulin akasa medaber. The Torah is talking about 2 types of things that you're doing wrong. Echel psul nicer, that says nicer, because chalalu is a plural. So the pasuk is referring to psul noisa, ve'echa psul tuma, and it's also referring to psul tuma. So by the pasuk of tuma, it somehow hints to noisa as well, and therefore that pasuk clearly says that all parts of the offering apply, the din of tuma apply to all parts of the offering. So also the din of noiser applies by all parts of the offering. So again, if someone is bituma, someone's tummy, and he eats all parts of the mincha offering, right, the shiyaria mincha or the kaimitz, so then he's chayiv kares. So same thing, if noiser also applies. If the time expired when you were allowed to eat it, so Noisa not only applies by the Shiyarei HaMincha, but it also applies by the Koimitz itself. So now we go to the next part. Chutz min Adam. So the Mishnah says, Dam, blood, 2 lines from the top. Blood, you're not chayiv, you're not chayiv, on eating dam because of Noisa and Tumah. So let's say a guy is Tameh, and he starts drinking the blood of the carbon. So he's not chayiv kares for that. Or if he does it by mistake, would he be chayiv another carbon chatas? No, there's no Indian iser tuma on the blood, and there's no expiration of noiser on the blood itself. How do I know that idea? Because the pasuk says regarding blood, ki nefesh. Now, first what the Gemara is going to first do is say we're going to have 3 psukim that says Me'ila does not apply by blood. Me'ila doesn't apply by blood. So once we know that Me'ila doesn't apply by blood, and the Torah tells you 3 times Me'ila does not apply by blood, at the bottom of the page of the Gemara is going to say that the Torah is telling you that Me'ila does not apply by blood. It's also telling you that Noiser doesn't apply by blood, and Tumah does not apply by blood. So first the Gemara says, how do I know Me'ila does not apply by blood? Same, different Mandi Yomrin had 3 different psukim. The Torah tells you, ki nefesh habasar badam, ula amakrag. The pasuk tells you, ki nefesh basar habasar badam he, vani nesati lechem. God says, I gave you the blood to bring a kapara for yourself. What does it mean, lechem? Shalachem yehi. The carbon, the blood of the carbon should be like the blood of a chulin, that there's no mi'ila. It's like the blood is yours. The rest of the carbon belongs to the Eibishter. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana Amakra, there's a pasuk says, lechaper, that the blood brings kapara. Lechapar nesativ leila mi'ila, that the blood only brings kapara, there's not mi'ila on the blood. Rabbi Yochanan says Amakra, the pasuk says by the blood, who? That means the blood is always it. Ki dam hu banefesh yichaper hu. So it means that there's no change in the din of blood. Lifnei kapara kla'acha kapara. Before you put the blood on the mizbeach is the same din as after you put the blood on the mizbeach. So what's the din? Ma'acha kapara. Just like after you put the blood on the mizbeach, ein boy din mi'ila. There's ein boy mi'ila. There is no mi'ila. Because once you do a mitzvah, once you perform the mitzvah for something, there's no mitzvah, there's no mi'ila anymore, because it's not Kachei Hashem. Kachei Hashem is prior to you doing the mitzvah. But once you perform the act of putting the blood on the mizbeach, there is no mi'ila. Af lifnei kapara ein by mi'ila. So also the blood prior to you putting it on the mizbeach, there is no mi'ila on the blood. In other words, if someone before putting the blood on the mizbeach takes the blood of the animal and fertilizes his field, so then there's no din mi'ila on blood, because for sure there would no be mi'ila after. We would say that there would be no din mi'ila after the blood is poured on the mizbeach, sprinkled on the mizbeach. So the Torah is telling you that just like that is a known idea, so also the blood before you put it on the mizbeach also has no mi'ila to it. Says the Gemara Ema. Let us say the opposite. How do you know that's what the Torah means to say? Maybe the Torah means to say that blood is even stricter than everything else. La'acha kapara lifnei kapara. After the kapara was done is like the prior to the kapara was done. Ma lifnei kapara yesh by bila. Just like before the kapara was done by anything. Before you do the service, there's the din of mi'ila. So also after you perform the service, there is a me'ilah. So maybe the Torah is telling you, let's go very strict on blood. Blood, before you do the service, we'll assume that there is me'ilah. And the Torah is telling you that it always says the din me'ilah, even blood after the service is performed. That means if you took the blood right off the mizbeach after the service was done, and you fertilized your field, there will also be a din me'ilah. Maybe that's what the Torah is telling you. So the Gemara says that cannot be. Why? Ein lecha dava shenasa mitzvasa umayalmai. There is no something that you do the mitzvah on something, and then there's going to be me'ilah. Once you do the mitzvah on something, there's no me'ilah on it. So there's no me'ilah, like after the carbon is brought and you have raw meat, there's no me'ilah on that. Says the Gemara, is that true? Right? Truma sedeshen. Truma sedeshen. You take a scoopful of ashes on the mizbeach every morning, and Kohen took it from the mizbeach and put it on the east side of the ramp of the mizbeach. That, after you perform that service, that ashes is osir bahana, even though you did the mitzvah. So why don't we say that the blood also should be like that? That even after you perform the mitzvah, there's a din me'ilah. And says the Gemara, Mishum dehave truma sedeshen ubig de kahuna. There's truma sedeshen and the big de kahuna of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol performs his service in the white begadim, and then after he does the service of the Kohen Gadol, he takes off that clothing, never use it again, and whoever uses that clothing for his personal service he violates the me'ilah. So we see even after you did the mitzvah, there is a me'ilah. So you have two psukim telling you the same idea. Truma sedeshen big dikuna. Shnei ksuvim aboim kachad. You have two psukim telling you the same idea, that after you do the service, there is a me'ilah. So those are the exceptions to the rule. Anything that's done after the service is performed cannot teach you by elsewhere. Therefore, by blood, for sure, after the service was performed, there is no me'ilah. So that means the drasha of the pasuk saying that blood is one always the same, is the pasuk is saying that after the me'ilah, after the service where there is no me'ilah, it will be the same din as prior to the service, teaching you that blood there is no me'ilah. Says the Gemara, Hanichel Rabbanam, according to Rabban that says V'hinicham Sham, that after the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, what does he do with his clothing? V'hinicham Sham. You get rid of it. You put it there, and you bury it. Tu'unin Geniza. It's buried. Even though you did the mitzvah, the Torah is telling you that there's me'ilah in there, and the Torah is telling you, therefore, you have to bury those clothing or hide it. Ella, Rabbi Yossi says, Mutaris hein lekoyin hedyet. A koyin hedyet, a big de koyin gadol, is mutar for a koyin hedyet. He can use it all year round. Uvavach lo yishtamish behen Yom Kippurim achad. Torah is telling you, v'hinicham sham means don't use it for another Yom Kippur, but not that you should hide it. So really, this mitzvah has never really been done. So we only have Truma Sedeshen, according to Rabbi Yossi, that teaches you that after the mitzvah is done, there's still a din me'ilah. So let's say the same thing by blood, that after the mitzvah is done, there's still a din me'ilah. And it says the Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Yossi has another thing. We should have a Truma Sedeshen, ve'egla rufa. Shnei ksuvim b'im kachat. Egla rufa, which is the pasuk says that the calf that you knocked off its head, it's also b'hana. And even after you did the service, that's two psukim that teach you the same idea, that after you did the service, there's still a me'ilah to it, and therefore, Egla Rufa and Truma Sedeshen, two psukim that teach you the same idea, you can't learn it by elsewhere. So therefore, blood, there was be no me'ilah even after you did the service. Says the Gemara, that if you have shnik sumba kenechad, you don't say it by elsewhere. That's fine. Elaman diyama, there's an opinion that says malamdim. You do learn it elsewhere. In other words, you need three psukim to tell you the same idea in order for not to be applied elsewhere. So maybe by blood, there also would be a application that blood after you did the service, me'ilu would apply. And says the Gemara, Trei mi'utiksiv. There's two limitations. Hacha, by Egler roof, it says ha arufa. The Torah doesn't extra hay. So the pasuk is telling you that only it is also bahana after you did the mitzvah, and nothing else. Also by Trumas Hadesh ksiv v'samoy. It says v'samoy. Put it next to the mizbeach. It doesn't say v'sam. El v'samoy. Only put it next to the mizbeach. So we dafka only Trumas Hadeshin is also bahana, nothing else. So therefore, only these two things that are also bahana, even after you did the mitzvah, nothing else. Therefore, you can't say you can't say the dimila of dam after sprinkling is done should be like before sprinkling is done. You do it the opposite. Just like there is no mila with blood after the zrika was performed, so also there is no meila before the sprinkling was performed. So now we got that straightened out. Okay, so now we straightened out three drashas that teach you from different Amarohim that teach you one idea, that there is no me'ila by blood. Blood, before you do the service on the Mizbeach, if you take the blood and you fertilize your field, there is no me'ila. So the question is, utlosi kroi bedam lamali. Why do I need three psukim to teach you same idea? And says the Gemara, lama'ute me'ila. That me'ila doesn't apply. Mi noiser, from blood, the iser of noiser doesn't apply. Umi tuma, from tuma, the blood, the iser of tuma doesn't apply. A person who's tame and eats the blood, he doesn't get, there's not chayiv kares for that. Aval, but pigel like tzarkra. Tell me that pigel, blood doesn't apply by pigel. That I know already. Now we learned to the Mishnah. Kol sheyesh lemetirin beilad beimzmech hayaven alamishim pigel. Dam gufa materu. Pigel only applies by something that is mater it, like the shiyari hamenochas, the leftover flour of the menocha, of the mincha, or the meat of a korban. Because the blood is mater, that meat, to be eaten or to be thrown on the mizbeach. But blood itself is a mater. And we said before, many times, that something that's a mater by itself, pigel doesn't apply. So now we know that pigel doesn't, that by dam, by blood, pigel, noiser, tuma doesn't apply. Now the Gemara says on the last line of the page, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shloisha krisis b'shlamim mai. Why did the Torah tell you three times this idea that a tamei should not eat the korban shlamim? A person who is tamei should not eat the korban shlamim, and if he does eat the korban shlamim, you get kares. The Torah tells you three times the same idea. We go to Memhei Amabes. So we say achas leklal, v'achas leprat, v'achas ledevarim she'einin nechom. That means two times it says in the parsek, even though it's not like a klal prat, it's a separate psukim far away. So the Torah tells you that the iser of eating. The Torah tells you now that a tamei is not allowed to eat any kachim. So I would think that if someone donated a Danish to the Beis Hamikdash, a tamei person who eats that Danish is chayev misa, right? Chayev kares. So that's why the Torah indicates that no, it only applies by kachim mizbeach. Only korban, a tamei person has the iser of kares of eating, but not by kache bedek habayis. V'achas, and one teaches you l'dvarim she'einin cholim, that the iser of tuma applies even by things that are not edible. For example, if a tamei person eats the ketoris, so if you eat that betuma, you get kares. So that's why I need three psukim. That it only applies by kacheh mizbeach, and whoever eats kacheh bedek habayis, you're not chayev kares. And according to Reb, and also to teach you that it applies by things that are not normally eaten. Says the Gemara, Ul Rab Shimon, the Amar Devarim Shein Echolem Ein Chayav Molei Mishum Toma Lasuyamai. According to Rab Shimon, that if you eat Torres, you're not chayav of Toma. So what does he do with that third psukim? Pasuk lasuya says the Gemara to teach you chatoyes hapnimiyas, the chatas that were brought on the inside. In other words, the ones that like the chatas of Yom Kippur and the chatas par helam davar shatzibah, par koy Mashiach. Salta daita chamina. I would have thought hoyel va'omer Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon said, "Kol shezrikas kol damai ein alam is be'achitzin keshlamim ein chayavim mishum pigel." Since the blood sprinkling is not like a shlamim, you're not chayav pigel. So I would think that since the chatas pnimius don't have the iser of pigel, I would think mishum tuma nami loy lechayev, that also tuma doesn't apply to a chayev or to a chatas pnimius. Kamash malon. That's why the Torah had to tell you a chayev chorus in an extra pasuk to teach you that whoever eats a chatas pnimius betuma is chayev chorus. So that's what Rab Shimon will do with that third pasuk. Noimi means another way of saying Omar. Rav Shimon's mechayev eshedar kelechal. Rav Shimon in the Mishnah disagrees with the Tanakama, and he holds you're not chayev of achilas tuma only on something that's edible, not on ketores. Now, we see in the Torah it says you're not allowed to eat kochim when you are tamei, and the Torah also tells you that an odom tahar is not allowed to eat kochim tameim. So itmar. We learned Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, Rabbi Lazav, Rabbi Chanina, Chad Mahai Zuza, Chad Mahai Zuza. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish had an argument. Rabbi Lazav, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina had an argument, and both one from one peer and one from the other peer, Omar would say machlokes, the machlokes between Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon in the Mishnah. If you chayev because of tuma on something that's not royal achila, it's betumas basker, betumas baser. If that is only if the baser became tamei. Right, the Chacham hold that even something that's eating Devarim Tmeim, there's an Isser to eat that even eating that something that's Tamei, there's an Isser of eating Achila, eating Kodesh that's Tamei. So Bahabasar, that even if it's not edible, even if let's say the wood is Tamei, or the Lavoina is Tamei, or the Keteris is Tamei, you that's the machlekes. Alva betumas aguf, but when it comes to when you're tamei, divrei akol, everybody would agree. Ain't like you don't get malchus. That means Chachamim would agree to Reb Shimon that whoever is tamei, he himself is tamei and eats wood, right, or the frankincense or the keteris, so he would not get malchus. Another said machlekes b'zu, kach machlekes b'zu, doesn't matter. Just like the Chachamim and Rav Shimon argue, same idea. If you eat meat that's tamei, if you eat the item that's tamei, does it apply also by something that's not royal achila? Rav Shimon says it does not apply, and Chachamim said it does apply. Same thing, they would have the same machlekes that if a person is tamei and eat something that's tahar, the Chachamim would be mechayev that person, even if it's something that's not royal achila. Okay. Now, my tama, what's the reason? Kivam the Karinim Bay v'habasar ashayiga v'chol tamei Karinim Bay v'tumansai alav. Since we darshan the pasuk, even something that's not edible to eat, the pasuk that talks about eating bisar kodesh tamei. The Torah says v'habasar ashiga b'chol tamei. So therefore, we also read it as something, even if it's not edible. The pasuk says the person that eats from bisar zevach shlomim v'tumasai alav, that teaches you, pasuk teaches you to eat kachem when you are tamei. So since the Chachamim hold that by Isser eating basar kodesh that's tamei includes things that are not edible to eat, so same thing, even when you're tamei, it includes both, whether it's edible or whether it's not edible. You're still chayev. Rav Tivuni Masnei Hachi. Rav Tivuni, that was Rav Tivuni understanding of the machlokes amaroyim. Rav Kahana Masnei Hachi, but Rav Kahana had a different version of what the machlokes amaroyim is. Chad Mahai Zuzu, Chad Mahai Zuzu, a sefer. They're arguing on the end. that according to Rab Shimon, they're not arguing about the Rabbanan. Chad Amamachlokes, when does Rab Shimon argue against the Chachamim Tumas Guf? But Tumas Basar, even Rab Shimon would agree that if the item itself is tamei, let's say the ketores is tamei, let's say the wood is tamei, that if a person eats it, even Rab Shimon would agree that you would get malchus, because there's an extra pasuk that says that, and Rab Shimon is not going to argue against that. Others say that Rab Shimon would not so fast agree to that, and if the item itself is tamei, then Rab Shimon would still say that you don't get malchus. That Rab Shimon would still argue and says that even if the item is tamei, you would not get malchus. My tama, because kivin deloy karinim bay. Since according to Rab Shimon, we don't darshan the pasuk regarding something that's not edible. Regarding something that's so the pasuk that says that for that somebody's not allowed the isra of somebody's tummy to eat kodesh, the tumasar loy v'nichrasa. So loy karinim v'habasa sheyiga b'chol tamei lo yechal. So according to Rab Shimon, just like when you're tamei, we don't darshan to include something that's not edible. So when the item is tamei, we're not going to darshan v'habasar to teach you it includes even things that are unedible. So Mistama, that Rab Shimon holds that things that are not edible are not included in the isser of the tamei eating it. Says the Gemara, question. There's a pasuk, there's a brisa that says v'habasar, that includes wood and frankincense, that even though they're not edible to eat, they're including the itza. How could Rab Shimon not hold of that drasha? It seems, very clear, extra v'habasar, including anything that's like the meat. And says Gemara, lefsuli bi'alma. Of course, eitzim levoina, you're not allowed to put it on the mizbeach, but we're not going to be mechayev if you eat it. So even this version is Rab Shimon would still argue no matter what. If it's unedible, you're not chayev even if it's tamei. Okay, new Mishnah. The shisha devarim hazebech nidbach. For 6, when a person shechs a carbon, he has to have in mind 6 things. What are the 6 things? The Shem Zebach, he has to have in mind that he's makar of the carbon for whatever the carbon is. Chatas, Osham, Oila, the Shem Zeveach, he has to have him say who the owner of the carbon is. The Shem Hashem, he has to say, I'm makar of this carbon, the Shem Hashem. The Shem Ishim, he has to say, I'm makar of this carbon, that I want the fire of the Mizbeach to consume those parts that are brought on the Mizbeach. The Shem Reach, he has to have in mind, interesting, that he wants God to smell the burning of the meat. The Shem Nichoyach, and he has to have in mind, or say out, that he wants to bring a Nachas Ruach. He wants to do something, a Nachas Ruach, for the Eibishter. Chatoyis Asham, and Chatas and Asham, the Shem Chet. You have to say out what Avera you're bringing this Chatas and Asham. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi argues, it's better off not to say it. He says, even if you don't say these things out, kasha, the behemoth is kasha, the carbon is kasha, who Tanai Bezdin. Bezdin says that even if you don't say anything out, you're yaitza. You're still yaitza the carbon. And the Bezdin did not want a guy shechting the carbon to say these things, because maybe the person that's shechting the carbon, he's going to get it wrong, and he's going to shecht it shloi l'shmai, even though the owner had intentions for something else. Let's say the owner wants it for chatas. The guy that's shechting is so overworked, he's going to say, I'm shechting an oila. Ein machshava haylechas echla achar ovid. Then who's going to decide that? It's going to go after the one that's doing the service, the sheichet, and he's going to passel the whole carbon. So we'd rather him not say anything, and just Bezdin says that the K'nai Bezdin, that the machshava is not necessary, because whatever it was meant to be, it was meant to be, and it's a kosher zebach. We don't want you to passel zvachim. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Yehuda Sav says, Oila, it says, V'hikter HaKoyin as HaKoil Mizbecha, Oila Reich Rechoyach Lashem. So we darsh from that pasuk. Oila teaches you L'Shem Oila. You have to have a mind L'Shem Oila. La'apuke L'Shem Shlomin. You shouldn't think that it's a Shlomin if it's an Oila. Deloy. Ash Ishe teaches you L'Shem Isham. You have to put it on the fire. La'apuke Kebaba Deloy. That you're not gonna you not have a mind to put it on the fire to make it roasted and then eat it. But rather you have to have a mind that you're putting it on the fire so it should be totally consumed by the mizbeach. Reach, l'shem reach. That we want that Hashem should smell, so to speak, the carbon being burnt. La puki, that excludes Avram Shetzolam, the Helen, the light. We don't want to roast it first outside the mizbeach, and then after it's roasted, then we're going to put it on the mizbeach. God doesn't smell it that way. You already burnt it a little bit beforehand. Rav Yehuda said, Avram Shetzolam. Let's say you roasted the meat outside the mizbeach, and then the Helen. Then you brought it onto the mizbeach. Ein b'hamishim reach. You're not mekayim the mitzvah of the God needs to smell the carbon that's roasted. So you put it on the mizbeach raw. That's mikoyach. Teaches you l'shem hanachas reach ruach. You want to bring before to do God's will, to bring Him a nachas ruach. L'Hashem, that teaches you have to be makar of the carbon oila l'shem mi shahoy oma b'hoy oilam. Because you want to say you want to say the makar of the carbon to the one that created the world. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Yehuda said in the name of Raz, Chata sheshachta l'shem oila psula l'shem kulin k'sheira. If you shechted a carbon chatas for a carbon oila, then of course the chatas is possible. That was the first Mishnah in our Masechta. L'shem chulin, but if you shechted l'shem chulin, not for a chatas you're shechting l'shem chulin, the chatas will be kosher and the kahanim could eat the meat. Obviously, the guy has to bring a new carbon, but it's a kosher carbon. Amar Abloza, my time of the Rav. What's the reason of Rav? So the Gemara says, when you have a chatas for an oila, that makes the carbon possible. So only kachim could destroy other kachim, but chulin cannot defile kachim. So chatas that was geshachted, slaughtered for a carbon oila, that still will remain kosher. So ends Daf Mem Vav.